Hey everyone, Matt Suess here, and today we are going to have some fun because I'm going to be testing the brand new OM-1 and putting it up head-to-head against the EM1 MkIII in a high ISO test at ISO 25600 here in the studio. We're going to be taking a look at in-camera JPEGs, we're going to take a look at the RAW files processed in Capture One Pro, also in camera RAW, and also the new OM Workspace that replaces the Olympus Workspace. Now, normally I do not do these types of in-studio tests. I prefer to test this out in the field, and that's where I work, is out in the field. So I would much rather be testing this underneath the night sky stars, photographing the Milky Way, where I can really test this out in the field. But I've had this camera for just about a week. It's sitting right over there. You can see it over there. And I haven't really had any opportunity to get out for any clear night skies. I am hoping for a trip later this coming week in Moab or Zion, depending on the weather. We're getting snow tomorrow, so hopefully soon I'll be able to do some real world tests out in the field. But for now, we're going to rely on the studio tests. And I did post just the other day, or just yesterday actually, in the Facebook groups. I posted, and here's a post here in the Olympus OMD education group, where I did a test last night because I'm just dying to get out and test this camera at the high ISOs. So I was like, okay, I'm going to use my dog as a model. And this is at ISO 25600. And a lot of people had some questions. They were wondering, hey, did I see a full two-stop difference in noise reduction that OM system is claiming? They're asking, well, hey, you process this in the new OM Workplace that has that AI noise reduction. Is that doing more of the noise reduction as opposed to just a sensor? Is it software or sensor? So I decided to, okay, best thing to do is get into the studio and let's go ahead and take a look at some results. I do want to say before we get started though, I am sponsored by OM System as an OM ambassador. I used to be an Olympus educator, but now I'm an OM System ambassador. However, my viewpoints are my own, so they didn't pay me to do this video. I am doing this just to help you guys out and show you what is available in this camera and how exciting it is and why I'm so excited about this. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to Olympus Workspace so we can take a look at the setup here that I have, and also some information too. Now I have the EM1 III and I have the OM1, both of them shot at the exact same settings, minutes apart, using the same lens. I'm using the brand new 12-40 f2.82. Both were shot at 17 millimeters at 1/250th of a second at 5.6 at 25,600 under studio lights that I have up here. Complete controlled environment. Nailed the exposure perfectly. That is very important to know when we're doing tests, all this information here. Now, some people have been asking if I supply the RAW files so you guys can check it out yourself. Normally, I don't do that, but in this particular case, I am. Look down below. There'll be a link that will send you to my website. Punch in your email address. I'll email you a link that you can download the files. The only thing that I ask is that you don't distribute those RAW files. Keep them to yourself. If you know friends who might be interested in seeing these RAW files, send them to that link so that they can download them themselves. Now go ahead and feel free to make your own videos using those files, but again, I just ask you, just don't distribute those RAW files on your own. First up, what we're going to do is take a look inside of Photoshop, and we're going to take a look at the JPEG straight out of the camera. Let me go ahead and zoom in on this just a little bit here. Now, these JPEGs straight out of the camera, I didn't do any adjustments at all, just put one on top of the other. On the top layer, I have the OM1. On the bottom layer, I have the EM1 MkIII. And if we just take a look here without zooming in too much, doesn't look too much of a difference here. However, if we look around up top here, in particular where this dried out flower is, this is the EM1 MkIII, I'm losing some color in that, especially compared to the OM1. And just going back and forth here, let's zoom in a little bit more because this is where we can really start seeing some differences. And these differences are subtle, I admit, but there are differences. And again, here is the color in that dried out flower. This is with the OM1, and that is with the EM1 MkIII. Lost a lot of color up there on that dried out flower. Let's go ahead and let's scroll around here a little bit. In this dried out flower in the middle, this is the EM1 MkIII and the OM1. Again, losing a little bit of color in that purple range. Let's scroll over here to these, let me get this out of the way here and this out of the way, to these feathers. We are looking at the EM1 Mark III, and I can see a lot of color noise in here, and almost like a little bit of moire down here. Definitely doesn't seem to be fully sharp, especially when we take a look at the OM1. Look at the difference in there. I mean, these feathers look really, really good compared to the EM1 Mark III. So I'm seeing a big difference in there. If we scroll down over here, we're looking at the OM1 again right now. And just looking in this general center area here, there's some noise. Yeah, a little bit of noise there. Obviously, the JPEG has been processed in camera from the RAW. It did the demosaicing inside the camera, applied its noise reduction and all that stuff. And so that's what we're looking at in this baked-in JPEG version. Here is the EM1 Mark III, and I'm losing some detail, especially in these pencils and around the edges here. A little bit more noise. The noise looks more chunky. It doesn't look as fine and tight as it does here in the OM1, which, especially in this green swatch here, looks a little bit more film-like, grain-like with the noise. And again, here is the EM1 Mark III and the OM1. There's also another area down over here. This is the OM1, looking pretty decent down in this area here. Let's take a look at the EM1 Mark III, and there's definitely some color noising in half of this swatch over here that is not appearing in the OM1. Okay, let's now go into Capture One Pro. Now, Capture One Pro has been updated. It does fully support the OM1 already. Let's go ahead and I'll show you what my settings were inside of Capture One Pro. And I didn't do any adjustments. All I did was sync the white balance, because I did shoot this in auto white balance. I just synced the white balance using the white square up on top here to make sure my white balance was the same. No other adjustments. I left everything to default with the sharpening and with the noise reduction. Just left it at its straight defaults. Exported those as 16-bit TIFFs. Brought them into Photoshop, put one on top of the other. We're looking at the OM1 on top right now. And let's do here is the EM1 Mark III and the OM1. Let me get this into there we are, full screen here. Okay, so not a big, huge difference when zoomed out this much, but I don't know if you can see this in the video. I can see a little bit of banding up in here on the EM1 Mark III. Not super, super visible, but I can notice it on my color calibrated BenQ monitor. Here is the OM1. Let's go ahead and take a look at the info palette. Let me bring this in, and we'll just zoom in just a little bit more. And I'm going to use the eyedropper. I have this set for a 5x5 average. We're going to be paying attention to the RGB values. Now, of course, RGB values for black would be 0, 0, 0. Looking around here in this photo, it's all really close to 0, 0, 0. But look at this, RGB 5, 5, 5. That means it's really neutral. I set my white balance on this white square here, and I'm getting some really nice balance all in the background here. So, we're staying in the 5s, maybe up to 6 in some areas, but in the 3s to 6. Let's take a look at the EM1 Mark III now. And look at this. This is jumping all over the place. 8, 6, 7, 12, 10, 10. 11, 0, 11, 10s, 11, and some areas where it's 5, 5, these are all neutral, but these numbers are a little bit higher, and that's telling me that it's not as dark in my deepest blacks. That could probably mean that there's some noise in there, so we're not seeing things right yet. This is where these studio shots and these studio tests kind of fail the consumer, I think, and that's why I don't always prefer doing these tests. I prefer doing it in real world results, because I'm not going to have the ideal lighting conditions. I'm going to need to bring up shadows. I'm going to be needing to do some adjustments here. So let's go ahead and take a look. Let me go ahead and I'll just zoom out again. And let's move this info palette over, because what I'm going to do is make an adjustment layer. So let's go and grab the levels. And what I'm going to do is bring up my midtones over 2 stops in my midtones. So let's go ahead and bring this, let's go up to like 2.5 or right around there. Okay, so I am seeing some noise here, just a slight bit of a little bit of horizontal banding. This vertical banding here, it's not banding, it's actually the seam in my backdrop. So don't worry about that right up there. Let's see what that looks like when we're doing the same exact thing to the EM1 Mark III. Look at that. Okay, a lot of banding. We're getting some green along the edges. The color, we're losing, the color is just looking really bad. And we're getting that kind of traditional green in the shadows. And we can see that clearly in this image. I mean, if I go even more to an extreme here, pushing this up a little bit further, comparing the EM1 Mark III to the OM1, there is a big difference in noise when you start working with the file, not just with the studio shot, all the pretty light, and hey, this is it. You got to do something to the photo to start seeing some things. And that's a real world scenario because you're going to be shooting, you're going to be processing your photo. This is what's going to be happening here. So again, EM1 Mark III and the OM1. Let me go ahead and just turn that off. We'll just get back to just a straight shot and we'll just compare. We'll go up in here into the feathers. Let's just see what we had up here. Feathers look really decent, nice and sharp, nice and clear. And we'll take a look at the EM1 Mark III, and I am seeing some color noise in here in my shadows. It's going green again, and I can see that color noise over here. Not as detailed in this feather here as we are in the OM1. So this is a lot cleaner. Is it that 2 stops? I don't know. I'm not putting this on any official meter to see exactly. I'm just going with what my eyes see, and I can see a big difference here, especially if I have to do any work to the image, bring up midtones, adjust the exposure. That, I think, is where you're going to really see the big differences. Let's get out of here, and let's go ahead and check out Camera Raw inside of Photoshop. Now, I will say Camera Raw, Camera Raw is used in Photoshop and also Lightroom. Adobe isn't officially supporting the OM1 yet. I think it's almost a mistake that it actually is working. So it hasn't been optimized fully for the OM1. It has for the EM1 Mark III, of course, because that's been out for a couple years. But I think we can still get a good idea as to what's going on here. Now, let me go ahead and grab those 2 RAWs. Okay, here we are inside of Camera Raw. Got both files here. Here's the OM1 and sharpening all at the defaults. Same thing with the EM1 Mark III. And I didn't do any other adjustments to it except set that white balance so that both photos were in sync color-wise. Let me go ahead and make sure that we are opening this up as 16-bit files. And there we go. And we'll go ahead and open these 2 up and we're going to compare them. All right, let me throw my OM1 on top of the EM1 Mark III, and just so that we remember, we'll call this OM1, and perfect. Let's take a look at this now. Now, again, just the basic noise reduction has been applied. These obviously look a lot noisier than those JPEG files. Why is that? That is because the JPEG files already had that demosaicing baked in. Did the noise reduction. Olympus does the noise reduction inside the camera. So I didn't do any noise reduction outside of just the basic default inside of Camera Raw. So we do see these a little bit noisier. We can clean that up a little bit, but let's just see what it looks like straight out of the, kind of like almost literally straight out of the camera. Let's go ahead and take a look up over in this area here. And remember that flower? So we're still getting color from the flower in Camera Raw. And we go to the EM1 Mark III, and we're losing that color again. So we definitely have less color in the EM1 Mark III at high ISO than we have in the OM1. Let's take a look at, grab my eyedropper here, and we'll take a look here. These numbers and the RGB values a little bit higher than Capture One Pro. So we're seeing getting up into the 6, 7s, 8s, almost jumping up to 11 here and there. Let's take a look, turn that layer off, and we're looking at the EM1 Mark III, and these numbers here are now getting into the mid-teens. And so doing a similar pattern to what Capture One Pro was doing, it looks like Capture One Pro has a little bit better base noise reduction with the default settings, would be what I would interpret that as. Let's go ahead now and we'll zoom out, and let's do that test now with our levels. Let's go ahead and bring that middle up to where were we, about 2.5 on the other one. Okay, a lot of noise here. We can see some horizontal banding in this. Let's take a look at the EM1 Mark III. a lot more horizontal banding. Look at the green over here on the left and the right, and we got purples and magentas in the middle. Personally, I would much rather have this OM-1 file than I would with the E-M1 MkIII. Definitely a lot cleaner. Let's go ahead and zoom in on our feathers. Take a look over here. This is the OM-1, and switching to the E-M1 MkIII. Not a huge difference, but there is, again, a little bit of a difference in here. Let's go ahead and take a look here. This is before, this is the OM-1. And I'm seeing a little bit of a shift to the green. That doesn't surprise me because I was seeing that green when I brought up the midtones. I was seeing that green on the right-hand side. But if you were just comparing just a test studio shot, just flat out here with perfect lighting, yeah, okay, you're not going to see that much of a difference until you then start working on the file and bringing up some midtones and doing some adjustments. Let's go ahead and take a look and see what happens with OM capture, or not OM capture, OM Workspace. Now, I've gone ahead and already exported these. I've done the same thing. I did nothing with the AI noise reduction, so there hasn't been any noise reduction at all applied to these. These were, we can go right back over here and take a look. Sharpness, all this stuff is turned down. Let's go ahead here. No noise filter, no noise reduction, AI, that was all turned off. Exported both of these as 16-bit TIFFs. Here we are inside of Photoshop. And let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit. And wow, why does this look a lot less noisy? I had all that noise reduction turned off. Here is the big key part of any type of RAW processing. Each RAW software has its own algorithms to demosaic the file. It looks like OM system software, OM Workspace, is applying some noise reduction behind the scenes to really help clean it up. That's all part of their demosaicing of the raw file. And it's doing a heck of a good job on this file. I mean, look at this. And let's take a look here. We'll look at my, we'll bring my info panel over. We'll go into this area here. Okay, so, you know, 657, all still somewhat neutral, all in that low number. Let's take a look at the E-M1 MkIII. Okay, so, you know, pretty similar, maybe just a touch higher, not too bad at all. But let's take a look at that color over here. So that color, we keep on losing that color in that dried out flower. We have the color here. We're losing it here. Let's go over to our feathers and let's go ahead and see what's going on. Let me get rid of my, let me move that over there. And here is the E-M1 MkIII. Again, lost that sharpness. I can see color noise in here. Go ahead and take a look at the OM-1. Not as sharp as Capture One Pro, but still clean. Still a lot cleaner than the E-M1 MkIII. Let's take a look up at the top of the feathers here. And yeah, seeing some color noise in there. Let's zoom out and let's do our test with the levels. And let's go ahead and bring that in. We'll bring up our midtones. So we were at right around 250 there. Look at that. This has to be the cleanest version of all the software. So OM system is doing a heck of a job processing these raw files, I'll have to say. And let's take a look at the E-M1 MkIII. Now see, look at this. It has softened up that banding in there, but look at how much brighter it is. You know, we're losing that contrast, the dark tones in our photo in the E-M1 MkIII versus the OM-1. So I would definitely say that the OM-1, again, is superior to the E-M1 MkIII, especially when you have to start pushing the file. And I will say this is pretty impressive with this OM Workspace. This is doing some really nice results in these high ISO images on both cameras. But for the work that I do under the night sky, I would definitely prefer the OM-1 over the E-M1 MkIII if I had the choice between the two. All right, so now time for the conclusion. I definitely believe that the OM-1, especially in the studio test here, showing you guys, it does have its advantages over the E-M1 MkIII. How much of an advantage? Again, it's tough to say in these studio settings. I need to get out into the field, have both cameras on a tripod, shooting the same thing at the same time with the same light, same lens, real world examples, process those files in a real world type of a way to see the difference. I have a feeling that we are going to be seeing that close to two-stop performance in that type of a scenario. These studio shoots, man, pay attention to what you're seeing and reviewers, what they're doing on the tests. If you just go with just a straight shot, no adjustments at all, comparing, you are not getting the full story. I've already started seeing some videos out there where people are downloading from DP Review, and they're downloading a raw file shot 2 years ago from the E-M1 MkIII under different lighting conditions and a different studio setup, and they're comparing it to the OM-1 and trying to make some sense of it, and just, again, not doing any adjustments at all to the files. At first blush, these files are looking very similar. When you start needing to do some post-processing, and you're going to need to do post-processing on your photos, that is where you're going to see the difference. And I've been talking about night sky a whole lot. This is going to play in with also wildlife too. So imagine on an overcast day photographing a moose, all that color noise that you're going to be having in the shadows in an E-M1 MkIII and also an E-M1X too, because they are very similar in their post-process or in their files. You're going to have much cleaner shadows in the OM-1. So once again, I am Matt Suess. If you like this video, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button too. If you have any questions, go ahead and throw them in the comments there. Keep an eye out. Be sure you subscribe. Keep an eye out for some other tests that I'll be doing down the road here. I can't wait to get out under the night skies and test these cameras out side by side. But I needed to get this video out right away because I started seeing some misinformation and some questions, going on, what's going on with this high ISO noise. I hope this answers a couple of them. Again, let me know in the comments below. I'll talk to you later.